This is Jeff Mayhugh, and this is Politics and Parenting. Um, so I'm tired. It is 8:30 on Sunday night, and I was talking to my wife earlier today. I feel like I go like a mile a minute. I'm up at 6 every single day, and I just want to break. But it's Sunday, and that meant church. So I got up, uh, let my wife and kids sleep in today. So they go to the 10 o'clock service. I get there at the 8. And then at the 10 o'clock service, when my family arrives, I go and I volunteer over at Underground. And I had this great experience today where there was this one of the other volunteers, a high school volunteer, sat down and played chess with me. And he was telling me about his plan. Like he wants to open a Chick-fil-A and he's going to school for business. And I thought it's refreshing to hear a 19-year-old like have a solid like plan and purpose in their lives. Well thought out as well. And I was like, I had this mentor when I was starting my business, and he used to tell me, he said, Jeff, all you got to do to be successful is you got to know business and you got to know your widget. Whatever that business is, you need to know the foundational information of that business and then know how to sell the business and you'll be successful. And this kid at 19 years old, he's working at Chick-fil-A and he's going to school for business. He's got it all planned out and he's going to be successful. And it's just a little bit of ray of hope. Um, and why do we need hope? Well, today I have a special guest with me, Tyler Syck. He is assistant professor of political science at the University of Pikeville, and he's written this wonderful essay called "The Americans Who Long for Caesar." And Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me back.
So that young man, uh, he's providing me with a little bit of hope because when I look at the power sphere and I look at the people in charge, it can be a little scary when you have people that are kind of clamoring for an authoritarian strongman like Caesar, right?
Yeah, I mean, but I guess for those of us who don't like Caesar, and it's sometimes surprising that people who do in history, but it can be very frightening that there's a large sector of the population who now seem to be longing for Caesar, and a number of respectable people who maybe aren't longing for Caesar, but are perfectly um, content or able to provide an intellectual foundation for the people who do, and thus fan the flames unintentionally.
Yeah, and so for our listeners who maybe you're not familiar with Caesar, or maybe you've heard about Caesar, you're not 100% who Caesar was. So Caesar was a populist who rose to power in the Roman Empire, basically through the military. He and his faction sought to curb the power of the aristocrats, and during his rule, he concentrated power, and he basically used it to give the people what they want. Um, Lots of welfare programs, and like as we look at our today, and you write about it as well in the essays, like you mentioned some people who are kind of looking forward to that guy who's just going to take power and give people what they want.
Yeah, and there's something alluring about Caesar more than most strongmen, I think, because like you said, he actually does give the people what they want. He's different in that way. A lot of dictators use the people to get power and then they don't do anything for them. I'll happily admit Caesar actually does things for the Roman people. He expands the Senate to include the common people and even Gauls, which aren't even Romans. He gives them welfare, all these sort of things. And so there's a large number of people who think we're at the late stages of the Roman Republic and our American Republic. That the Republic is fading, it's collapsing, all traditions flown out the window, all order has fallen out the window. And really the only thing that can fix it is some strong, powerful figure who can kind of swoop in and remake the whole thing in their image.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what people like about Trump in a lot of ways. I mean, I hear from so many conservatives or, just like people in my own community who are Republicans, um, who are just like, you know what? It's so bad. It's so corrupt. Like I'm fine with Trump coming in there and just burning it all down. It deserves to be burned down. Or he can fix like there's two kind of strains of thought that go along with this faction of people. One is burn it all down and start over, or two is he can actually just do what Caesar did and give the people what they want and fix all the problems. I think the failing in that is we're not all on the same page here. If Trump goes in and gives, he's only giving half of the people what they want or a third of the people what they want. He's not really giving everybody what they want if he goes in and acts on his own accord.
Yeah, Trump seems, I think, kind of the obvious candidate for this emotion, because he seems so authoritarian in his rhetoric. And like you say, a lot of people, just average voters on the right, really think this has gotten such a big mess that it really just takes somebody to kind of scrap a lot of it, screw the whole system, and just do what needs to get done. Um, and that's an alluring possibility if you really think things are that far gone. I have friends who tell me the republic can't be saved anymore. The best we can do is just manage to create whatever happens afterwards in such a way that it'll be nice for people. And for people like that, Caesar or a strong man is really alluring because the alternative they really think is chaos or a tyranny of the people they don't like. A lot of the advocates of Caesar, and I mentioned this in the article, believe that the United States is effectively no longer a republic anyways. We're living in an oligarchy where the
Mm.
wealthy control everything. And so for them, the republic's already gone. So what's the
Well,
problem with strong man?
s- so all right, so it's kind of like Schrodinger's cat, right? So I do believe that those people are right. We are a corporate oligarchy right now, but we
Hmm.
have the functionality and the structure of a republic. And there are some things that we can do before all virtue is lost and power is converted all the way to the corporate oligarchy that can save the republic. I mean, you know me, my thing is uncapping the house, right? Uncapping the house would diversify that corporate oligarchy power, right? It would give it from the donors and the people and the representatives of Congress, and it would share it with more of the people, right? Give
Hmm.
more factions a say in the conversation. And then campaign finance, right? If you write new campaign finance law and you bring the dark money into the light, let the Congress representatives wear on their backs who's paying for their office and let the people know what's going on. And all of a sudden you see some changes. So while they are right, they're also not right. And, so
Well, I mean that's the thing. I think my favorite statesman of the late Republican era, he's not uncontroversial for reasons we don't have to talk about right now, is Cicero.
mm,
And the thing about Cicero as a politician, which and I'm kind of an oddball, I think, and that I find Cicero more interesting as a politician than as a philosopher. And the really interesting thing about Cicero as a politician is he seems particularly aware that the powerful elites in Rome have too much power. That they don't really understand what the common people need, and that they don't really understand how the constitutional system's supposed to work. So he gets that. But the second thing he gets is that the populists waiting in the wings are gonna throw the baby out with the bathwater. They're gonna
mm,
undo the whole thing in their attempt to fix, but to him, are problems that require reform, not revolution.
mm,
And I think that's exactly kind of where we're at right now in the modern United States. There are problems. They are serious problems. They don't require that we scrap the whole system. We are
mm.
not beyond the point where the republic has ceased to exist.
Yeah, so that's spot on, right? Like, I mean, that's like it's like looking back through a mirror and stepping into a portal and walking into the same day.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's yeah, it really is. And I'm teaching a class in ancient Rome, and I think a lot of my students have mixed feelings about Cicero because he's so vain and gossipy, and he's such a politician.
Yeah.
But he's absolutely right about this, and it applies beautifully to today. It's one of those instances where you can just say, "Oh, that's exactly how it is right now."
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, you basically, so the Democratic Party would basically be the aristocrats who are kind of out of touch with the common man, with
Yeah.
some of the old guard Republicans on board. And then
Yeah.
your populist are your Tea Party, MAGA wing, Bernie Sanders, left wing. Those are all your populist, right?
Yeah.
And so they want to burn the system down because it's bad
Yeah.
for everyone because
Yeah.
they're on the outs of power. And the people running the power, the aristocrats, they've forgotten what their job is. Like they are not up to the task of governing and leading right now, and it's put us in a very precarious position.
Yeah. It's kind of freaky how easy the parallels are. I'm not usually one for saying, "Oh, I know exactly where this person would be in this particular
Mm.
historical moment." It's freakishly easy with the Romans. It's
So
pretty easy.
okay,
Cicero would be a kind of moderate, I won't
Mitt
name his
Mitt Romney.
party, but a kind of establishment sort of guy.
Mm.
The interesting thing about Cicero is his early career, he was more of a populist, for the reasons that these are serious problems, and he understood that. Um, but
So Cicero, I'm thinking like Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney, maybe some sort of blue dog Democrat. It's kind of hard to tell because they didn't have parties. Um, but yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
No,
So speaking of Cicero, I've got this spot of the article I wanted to share or talk about. So you write, the reason despotic rule of one man does not work is simple enough. Such an arrangement is mimical. That's a hard word to say, by the way.
yeah,
Um,
sorry. It's
Thank
easy
you
to
for writing it. Yeah, it's easy to write.
write.
To law and liberty, the twin foundations of a healthy civilization. Political liberals, from Cicero to the American founders, understood that when power is undivided, nothing like human liberty can exist. Freedom is the water that permits the growth of so many other important features of good life, virtue, equality, creativity, and so on. Each of these attributes requires that humans have the power to shape their own lives. So as we compare, you know, this idea of one man, one power, and the republic, the American republic, right, the government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and there is a group of people that thinks that we are going to be more free and have more liberty if we give the power to one person
Yeah,
than sharing the power.
yeah, yeah, and I think, well, I think that to the credit of a lot of Caesar, modern day Caesars, I don't think they think we're sharing the power anymore. They think the oligarchs have all the power, and they think somehow this strong man's going to make us free. But they don't really, it seems to me, then understand at all what freedom is. Freedom has, if you kind of live by the whims of an individual, that's the opposite of freedom. It's actually, I think, a lot less free than living by the whims of an aristocracy or an oligarchy, because that's a collection of people and they can't actually act all together as a group with the same strength and conviction that an individual can act. So it's a lot easier to challenge an oligarchy and an aristocracy in some ways. I think it's not particularly so surprising that it's really the consolidation of absolute monarchy in the late medieval period that's the immediate precursor to liberal democracy. Um, that it is only when you have that strongman rule, you have French kings declaring, "I am the state." You actually
Mm.
have people revolt and start to form democracies. And aristocracy is not great, not as good as a democracy, I don't think, but it's a little more livable, I guess. You're going to be freer.
So what I like to tell people is what's great about our country, and like if we're talking about the group of people that want to burn it all down, the populace, right? Or the people that want to give it to a strong man, the argument that we have is our republic is special, okay? And because it blends those two things together, this democratic form with this aristocracy, right? The House is supposed to be the democratic form elected by
Mm.
the people. The Senate is basically an aristocracy supposed to be elected by the state legislatures. Now, we have some fundamental flaws in our system and how those things are apportioned
Yeah.
and elected upon, but those things can be remedied. What this does, it allows the people to communicate with their aristocracy. It
Yeah.
allows, and then the aristocracy in return communicates up the chain to the executive, and the executive follows the will of the people and the aristocracy. And it creates harmony through communication because at the end of the day, why do people get in? Why is there division in the world if it's whether it's a independent sovereign nation having an argument with another independent sovereign nation or a husband having an argument with his wife? The crux of that division is typically a misunderstanding of communication, like just a failing to understand one another and represent each other's interests. And so we should, back to the point, we should not burn it all down. We should reform the system. We shouldn't hand it over to a Caesar. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's right. And and earlier I was kind of arguing from the Caesar. I granted this, the Caesar's the premise that we're an aristocracy or an oligarchy now, but I don't even think that's true. Um, we're a we're a democratic republic, and we're muddling along as best we can, and maybe we're not muddling along as well as we should be. Um, but that's fixable. You can expand the House, you can make the Senate work better, you can try to get better people elected to office. These are the things we need. Um, and there's some policy things we need. Big corporations probably should be less powerful. That is a concern a lot of Caesars have. Ironically, they don't care to give one man all the power, but they don't like those companies. Um, but and we can enact reforms like that, but that's what we need or reforms. If we dump the whole system, just watch how bad things get.
Right. Well, no, I don't want to watch. That's why I'm involved. So, later in the article, you write, many people today on the political extreme believe that virtue must be enforced by the state, but the very opposite is true. Virtue requires a transformation of the human soul that cannot be imposed from without, but must be developed through reflection and free choice. So, first, this is just beautiful, by the way, beautifully written. Second, the
Thank
last sentence there, I mean, you kind of encapsulate what it is to be a Christian in that sentence.
you.
A transformation of the soul imposed from without, but must be developed through reflection and free choice. I mean, that
Yeah.
is so much apt to what it is to be a Christian. And Christian morals is a lot of what the American Republic was founded on. So, you know, when you talk about virtue, the people on the political extremes that believe that virtue must be enforced by the state, what do you mean by that?
Um, these people, and I will give a plug for an article I wrote some time ago, but it's about this it expands on this topic called "Recovering Virtue Means Recovering Self-Government." Not to be a salesman, but if you want to learn more about what I think about this, is any of your readers, that's a good place, or listeners, that's a good place to go. But what I mean, the people who want to impose virtue from without, these are people who believe that we live in a society that lacks virtue, that probably don't believe this unreasonably. Not a lot of selfless people and evidence on Twitter, at least. Um, and they think that the way to fix this virtue deficit is to have the government make people behave virtuously. And a lot of this is premised on, I think, a bad understanding of virtue, where virtue is things that you do. If you're a virtuous person, you behave this particular way, and if you follow all the rules, then you're a virtuous person. Whereas, like I say in the essay, virtue is really a state of the human soul. Your soul is transformed, and then you behave virtuously. The transformation happens first. The thing about making people act virtuously without actually transforming their soul is that they aren't virtuous. They're not selfless. They're just doing what they're made to do. Um, it's like making a small child do things, and sometimes children are too young. You can't reason with them yet. That's perfectly acceptable. But there comes a point at which they need to learn why it's
Mm,
the wrong thing to do, not just that they shouldn't do it. And the reason they need to learn it is because as soon as the parental figure is gone, the child loses the ability to do the right thing without thinking through issues themselves. Um, and it works the same in government. Now, having a government is not the same as having a family, but you provide the conditions through which people can discover what it means to be virtuous for themselves. but you
Mm.
can't make people be virtuous. And if you think we have a virtue deficit now, wait until the government is trying to make people virtuous.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the fear, right? Like, because at the end of the day, it's like you said, virtuous is a transformation of the soul. And, humans alone can't really know what's right or wrong, you know? Like we sit right now, over the weekend we just had Iran attack Israel, right? We've got Russia invaded in Ukraine. There are
No,
lots of bad things going on in the world, and at some point in time the US has to pick a side and be part of some sort of solution or stay
yeah,
out of it and hope that it doesn't reach their shores. Um, and it's hard to know whose side to be on in a lot of circumstances with, because you have to break one of the somebody that's trying to live a virtuous life. The one thing they don't want to do is end another human life.
yeah.
And when you're talking about war, life is ended regardless of whether you're participating
Oh,
or not. And so that kind of makes it difficult for decisions to be made and understanding what is right and wrong. Um, and I love your description about, the kids. And I think that where we are as a society a little bit is the fact that with the I don't know, like the daycare system and education system that we had running up until COVID, and the way that it kind of shaped children is it conditioned them to do the right thing early
mm,
before they were thinking about it. So children built all these really strong habits in behaving correctly, but they didn't understand why. And so
mm,
when they were left at home for 2 years and they didn't have that structure and they transitioned from one stage of life to the next stage of life, they weren't able to bring their learning with them. It got detached because they were only conditioned to do the right thing. And when the stuff that they needed to do on a day to day basis changed, they didn't understand how to bring why they did the right thing here
right.
to why they needed to do the right thing with the next stage of life. And so you see a lot of children struggling with that right now. Um, and so that's like me as a parent, my twins, I don't push them to do things until I think that they're A, ready.
Yeah.
They have to fail on their own first, is kind of my philosophy. I want them to want to do it. I want them to try on their own, and I want them to see their own failure so they learn from the failure and they take the time to say, why? And that way I can explain it to them. They can understand it. And then the next problem isn't so hard, because I
Yeah.
can't solve all their problems forever.
No, yeah, and it works the same for government. And Tacitus, the Roman historian, is absolutely just marvelous. He acts as though he's just writing this great unbiased historical narrative, but it is absolutely full of brilliant moral commentary. But he talking about the Emperor Augustus, who restores stability to Rome, restores the Roman religion, all these kinds of things. Um, Tacitus snidely comments that they're a lot more virtuous than they used to be. So he concedes Augustus's point in a way, but then he follows it up with a description of how slavish Roman people have suddenly become. And you start to wonder, is it virtue or are they just doing what they're told?
Hmm.
And it's sort of Tacitus's point, I think, that kind of totalitarian imposition of virtue didn't stick. Um, and when you had emperors who were less noble than Augustus, who have to admit is in many ways a noble person, um, it becomes very hard to maintain a virtuous society, much harder than it was before. And the Roman Empire is a long litany of good and bad emperors and a good and bad society that follows in the wake of them. When you have a good emperor, society is orderly. When you have a bad emperor, society is not. That's not a good way to live, where your society hinges on how good a ruler you have. Um,
Yeah. So you hit on something there. Do you ever see the show Three Body Problem on Netflix?
no, a friend of mine's watching it right now, so I've been
Okay.
told I need to, but I have not. But feel free to
S-
spoil
So
whatever.
I'm not gonna go into the show, but there's this it kind of ties into this. So you mentioned the fact that like it wasn't Augustus Caesar that was the bad guy. It
No,
was the guys later. Augustus concentrated the power, and then somebody else later used that power for bad.
no,
And that's why our founders didn't want to concentrate power, right? Like
yeah,
that example right there is like it's not about you and your generation. It's about your children and your grandchildren's generation. You either care about your family and your future and your
Yep.
country, or you care about yourself, right? And anyone that's supporting a strongman, in a lot of ways, what they're saying is, I care about myself. I want this person to be with power because they're going to give me what I want right now, and you all can figure out the future in the future.
Oh,
But what they don't realize in a lot of ways is they are setting up the future. They are
yep.
stripping power from the future from other people before they get a chance to have it. And so the tie into the three body problem is this guy, they've got this very complex, like intergalactic problem with aliens. Okay. And this scientist is basically nominated for this very prestigious position to help solve the problem. And he's kind of at the position where he's like, I really don't care. I'm single. I don't have any children. And the aliens aren't going to get here for 400 years. Why should I devote my time to this? And all I can think about is,
Mm.
as a father and a family man and a small business person entering politics, how difficult it is for me to be involved, and how many
Yeah.
people that I meet in politics that don't actually have families and are making the decisions. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, man, so their decision making is a little bit shorter than mine. And they care a little bit more about the present and a little bit less about the future. And
Yeah.
so that leads to that, hey, give me the strong man. He's going to do what I want.
Well, and I think even people with children who are very concerned about the future sometimes fall into this trap. Because at the end of the day, when you want a strong man, what you're saying is, I care about something more than self-government, and freedom. And maybe it's being economically well off, but maybe you care about virtue more than you care about self-government and freedom. Maybe you care about um, religion more than you care about freedom. People having the same religion as you more than you care about freedom and law. And you could just go down the list of things. There's something that they're prioritizing above everything else, and are absolutely willing to just take a risk that the future um, won't be that great, um, on the condition that they can make what they believe is necessary happen right now, the most important thing to them. It's often economic, but for people who are well off, it usually isn't economic. It's something more nefarious. And the intellectuals who back Caesarism in America tend to be pretty well off. Um, there's good money in backing a Caesar
Well,
in the
y-
realm.
so you bring up a funny point. So I would actually compare, if you're in the modern day sense, I do believe there is this groundswell of intellectuals who are lifting up just because they want to be part of that circle, that inner power circle,
Yeah.
whenever it happens. Like they feel like it's going to happen and they want a part of the pie.
Oh
And
yeah.
but I would actually compare it closer to the French Revolution.
Mm,
Um, and so because I think of like, I think it's Peter Churchin wrote this book about the overproduced elites. And I
mm-hmm.
think with the overproduction of elites or intellectuals in this country and the lack of power, as we talked about, the House is capped.
Yep.
The state legislatures are capped as well in a lot of circumstances. So the share of power in this country is significantly limited, and you have to
Mm-hmm.
kind of go through either the media, the corporation donors, or be lucky enough to be part of the aristocracy and get born into it.
Yep.
Um, and so with that, you have kind of like the French Revolution, where you've got this other group of leaders who will rally populist support to rise to power. The problem is, what happened? They couldn't control the mob. When you
Yep.
when you rouse popular support for, bad leaders, that you better lead good and you better lead fast.
Yep. There's an organization in Washington D.C., which I suppose I shouldn't name, so I won't. But and this is their whole thing. Let's train the new elite that needs to replace the current elite. They don't even hide it. This is their goal. The current elite are bad, but there's a number of other people who would be good elites, and that's who should be in power. That's who we're going to put in power, and that's their philosophy. It's pretty You almost have to admire the honesty in it, I suppose, but it's a very dangerous mindset
And it's
and
crazy that,
entirely self-interested too, I suppose.
well, yeah, because they're looking for a job. They're
Right.
basically like they're starting another business. They're like, look, Coke has lost its flavor. Okay. Come over here to the new Pepsi. Okay. We're gonna take good care of you. I mean, that's essentially what they're saying,
Oh
you know?
yeah, well, and and they all want to work in the next Trump or DeSantis or whoever it is, administration, and are perfectly willing to sell anything down the river to do it. So there's all kinds of different reasons why people might support us an American season. Some of them are noble, some of them are to do with poverty and then the need, the sort of being isolated from the system, and
Mm.
some of them are just naked ambition. Um,
What did Madison say? He said, ambition must be made to counteract ambition.
no,
He warned us of this. I was just, it's funny. I'm working on an article myself. I just finished it today, and it's kind of on the geopolitical mess that we've got going over there.
no.
And I tie it to the Adams administration and the partisan divide, the quasi-war XYZ affair,
Mhm.
the Aliens and Sedition Act, and I tie in the FISA approval that we had, where basically when the party's interest
Yeah.
superior to the people's interest, then the prospects for war actually go up, regardless of whether either party wants or doesn't want war. Just the internal bickering raises the alarm for war. And then typically what that requires, because now you have these polar opposites kind of fighting for dissent, you end up having this level of force that restricts people's rights. And so I kind of forgot where I was going with this. What did you say to tie me in? I lost my spot. Does that ever happen to you?
Yeah, it's happened to me in the middle of class. Um,
You
I
said
didn't know
something
what I
about
was saying either. I've gotten lost.
um yeah, so the just I forgot how it was tying into our conversation, but I guess I just wanted to talk about it. The you ever get like that? You're like, I just had it on my mind, so
That
it
in
needed to come
class
out
too.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Um, oh, it was the concentration of power, right? Because the Federalists were kind of
Yeah.
concentrating power at that point in time, and it was because of these prospects for war, right? And so as American citizens, like in all circumstances, we kind of want power not to be concentrated. It protects us, the people. Even if somebody is trying to give us what we want right now, we should be weary of that, because while they may give us what we want, they may take away something from our children or our grandchildren. And we should be more concerned. We should be more concerned about our future than we are about our present.
Yeah, I think that's right. Um, Mitt Romney says in the newest biography that came out of him about him by McKay Poppins, he says, I think if most of my colleagues thought about their legacy a lot more than they thought about re-election, this would be a better country. Thought about how their grandchildren remember them. I think might be the exact way he puts it. And I have a colleague who thinks that's sort of petty self-interest, and he wants nobody to be worried about how they're perceived, about the re-election. Doesn't want any of that. I just think it's odd. I think that's a kind of noble thing to worry about what you're leaving for future generations.
I see. I don't understand what else you would think about. Like, I mean, if you've done your job in the present and you've raised your children
Yeah,
and they've created families and they've raised their children and you're looking at the end of your life, you got to look back. The only thing left at that point is to leave something for the children that you don't meet.
yeah,
And that's your legacy. And I think about this, I lost my grandfather in 2017, and I'm in a unique position because where I'm sitting is my grandfather's property. And when he got sick, I was in the hospital with him, and that's what he cared about. His legacy was just him as a man, as a carpenter, building a house and leaving that house for his family,
yeah,
and um, it may not be the biggest legacy in the world, but it was really important to him. And
Mhm.
that's what he told me in the hospital. Is like, you know, I built that house with my two hands, with your grandmother's help and family's help. We cleared the lot. We did all of the work ourselves. And I just want to make sure that that house stays in the family. And so my brother and we were lucky enough to be able, he bought the house. We subdivided the land. I live on the land. So now my grandfather's legacy has expanded, because
Yep.
now there's two houses on that property. Um, and I think that's like, what else do you want out of life? Like when you
Yep.
leave.
No, I agree. And like I said, I think it would make for a better politics if that is how more people thought.
Yeah. Well, hopefully people will read your article and they will understand the argument of why a strongman is not the best decision for regular
Yeah.
citizens, despite the mirage they may put in front of you. And they will start to elect better leaders because at the end of the day, all of the reform issues, everything that we need to do to save the republic doesn't happen if we don't start taking our job in the election booths seriously.
Yeah,
And so, yeah,
that's true. Yep.
yeah, we need to get the voters out there. Read Tyler's article. Where can they find
That's
this
really
article
going
at?
to motivate the masses. I'm sure.
Look, I'm telling you. So if you're listening and you haven't read the article and you're thinking, I don't know if I want to read the article. It's an essay and I don't really like to read. Well, let me ask you this. Do you like a good story? Do you turn on TV and sit down and watch a 3-hour story? You can get a 3-hour story in like 12-minute essay. And you can get all the wonderfulness of that quicker. And that's what Tyler does. He writes a story and gives you information that makes you a better voter.
Now you're just buttering me up for some reason.
I mean, I'm a firm believer that if if there's already a group of people trying to create a new elite ruling class, then there might as well be another group of people trying to create a virtuous class of people to like, be part of the conversation.
That's a good point. Well,
Where can they find the article, Tyler?
you can find it on Persuasion's website. Give me half a second and I'll give you the exact um, persuasion.community um, dot sorry, yeah, persuasion.community should bring you up there. It's a kind of centrist publication. Kind enough to publish a couple of my pieces. And you can find all my articles on my personal website, jtylersyck.com.
Awesome. Tyler, as always, it's been a wonderful conversation. I appreciate you joining Politics and Parenting.
It's been a pleasure joining you anytime.
Peace and love.